Thank you. So, hi everyone. Thank you all so much for having me. My name is Caitlin Bergstrom. I'm a graduate student from Bemidji State University, graduating in May with a master's in environmental studies. And today I'm going to be talking a little bit about my thesis research, which is focusing on satellite and on-site habitat analysis of Minnesota's various woodpecker species. Oh, geez. Where am I going? Oh, no. That's fine. Okay. There we go. So, a brief outline of what I'm going to be talking about. First, I'll do a brief introduction and some background about my two woodpecker species and what the goal of my study was. Then I'll be going to the relevance of my research. Then I'll be diving a little bit into my method, specifically how did I use GIS and GPS within my field study. Then I'll briefly show some of my results, wrapping up with some conclusions and leaving a little time for questions. So my two species of interest was the blackback and the American three-toed woodpecker. Those abbreviations on top, those are their common shorthands that are used. The picture on the top there is of a male blackback woodpecker. The reason that they're called blackbacks is because they have an all black back. And then the picture on the bottom there is of a male American three-toed woodpecker. Almost every other woodpecker species has 4 toes, but these guys only have 3. And woodpeckers are considered a keystone species within the state of Minnesota and across the United States. They create nesting cavities that are then used by wood ducks, squirrels, chipmunks, songbirds, that and a bunch of different animals will use that as nesting cavities for their young, as well as they help overall forest health by eating bugs and grubs that would cause tree diseases and decay forest health. My two woodpeckers in particular are found in the boreal and the montane forest, so to the north and west of us. And there's a lack of knowledge about them just across the United States. They've barely been not studied outside of Canada and California. And most of the research that has been done has been on the blackback woodpecker. Three-toeds are extremely rare within the state of Minnesota. It's estimated that there's about 300 of them. And so since these woodpeckers have been seen occupying really similar habitats, most of the research that's been done on blackbacks is they're used for American three-toed woodpeckers as well. And they're kind of thought of as that they're one and the same type of species that occupy the same type of habitat, and therefore we can manage them as one and the same. So what my study wanted to do was specifically investigate them within northern Minnesota, understanding more of their habitat used to help inform wildlife management plans, and to see if they actually are in fact using the same type of habitat. So why fund environmental research? Well, if you go onto the nasa.gov/Earth Science website, you will see that NASA's Earth Science Division missions help us to understand our planet's interconnected systems from a global scale down to minute processes. NASA ESD supports research to understand species and correct management practices. Part of the mission is to understand the Earth and develop sustainable practices. And a way that we can do that is by combining surface biology with satellite imagery. When we combine those two things, then we're actually able to come with sustainable and correct practices, management practices for species. So how did I specifically use satellite within my study? Well, satellite allowed us to gather spatially explicit data in real time. And the way that we did that is that we used ArcGIS Field Map Tab and GPS. For those of you that aren't familiar, Field Map Tab is like having GIS right on your phone. I think it's really cool, actually. These two pictures that I have here are actually pictures of my phone, from my phone, kind of showing what the app looks like. So that picture far to the right is when you first decide to take a point, it'll show you where you are in real time. And then what we did for our studies, we had 2 main different category points of the data points that we were going to be taking. So our point selections were either a woodpecker observation or nesting tree data. And so from there, we could select which type of point were we recording at there, then and there. And then when you selected that, then you could write any kind of details that you wanted to about the point. So you can talk about the sex of the bird, what was it doing, what was the habitat like. That and any kind of information that you want to record it, you can do that then and there. You could also use this to show you where you are in real time. which was really helpful because the main way that you find woodpeckers is by listening for them. And the most effective way to do that is you will select a study area prior to you going out to the field, and then you'll draw transects within that, and then you'll walk up and down listening for these birds. And that's exactly what we did in our field study. So this picture that's closer to me is a zoomed in version of one of our stands. And all these black lines are our transects. So when you had the field maps up, you could watch yourself as you went up and down in real time looking for these birds, walking along these transects. So you're not walking aimlessly in the middle of the woods, which was really helpful. And then you could record your points right then and there. We also use GIS to select our stands prior to us going out into the field. So the main stands that we were interested in looking, previous studies that have been done said that the main places and the best use of our time would be focusing stands on stands that were either composed of red pine or jack pine. Almost every other woodpecker species is more likely to be using deciduous like aspen and things. These guys, that's a very unique feature that they prefer being in conifers. So the best use of our time would be focused on red and jack pine stands. We also wanted a variety within the stands that we selected. So the way that we did that is we categorized them by age and management. So any stands that we had that were 50 years or older, we classified as old, and then stands under 50, we classified as young. And then we also had stands that were managed by the Minnesota DNR Wildlife as well as Minnesota DNR Forestry. So these two government entities have different management and have different goals for their management. Wildlife manages with the primary focus for creating wildlife habitat, where forestry manages mostly with the intent for timber production. So we had all those different characteristics that we used to compare what type of habitat were these woodpeckers using, and to just gather more information about their habitats and characteristics. So this is a picture of my study area where I'm conducting my field research. This is within the Beltrami Island State Forest, which is about 6 hours north of here. It's a 700,000 or 700 acre mosaic of government, tribal, and private lands. Like I said before, we focused on government lands mainly, and this was our main study area here. And we conducted our field research from May through August of just last summer. And then after our field season, we took all of our information off of Field Maps app, uploaded that onto GIS, and that's where I was able to actually go through and clean and organize our data. So I organized our woodpecker observations based on the type of species, whether it was a blackback observation point or it was an American three-toed. And then our nesting points, I categorized that if that was an active nest that we had found or a previously used nest. So this is kind of a map of all the cleaned up data here that we have within our study area. Once we had all of those points clean and organized, then we wanted to see if we could get some quantifiable data about the type of habitat that they were using. And the way that we did that is that we ran a spatial analysis on GIS. We used Model Builder to do that. And what we did was we cross-referenced our points with FIM, which is the Forest Inventory Module that's owned by the DNR. That has all the information about DNR-owned stands. It talks about who owns it, what type of species are there, when was it last surveyed, that and a whole bunch of other factors are all on there. And the different categories that we were particularly interested in was the cover type, the age, the DBH or diameter breast type, so like how round is the tree, basal area, and ownership. So once we had all those categories, we ran that through Model Builder and saw what kind of tables and quantified data did we get. This is an example of one of the tables that we got. So this is showing some information that we got about blackback woodpecker foraging. This is a much shorter version of the table. Trust me, if I had the whole thing, you wouldn't be able to read any of it. So this is a shorter version, and each of these lines is showing a stand that we saw woodpeckers foraging in. And then once we had all of our tables, then we calculated some averages. We weren't able to calculate averages for cover type as well as ownership, because those are actually categorical variables. You have to go back onto FIM to see what those code for in order to see what is that information telling you. So in conclusion, combining satellite technology with GIS analysis and on-ground observations can provide indispensable spatially explicit data. Resources for ecological research, NASASD supports understanding of Earth's ecosystem, and my research hinted on using satellite imagery and GPS technology to help us gain further knowledge about Minnesota's rarest and most northern woodpecker species ecology. And with that, thank you so much for listening, and I'll take any questions.
Well, did you learn things that you weren't expecting?
Yeah, the question for those in Zoom land, what was like, did I learn anything interesting? Yeah, so like I said before, these woodpeckers are mainly thought of as they're one and the same. You can manage for them the same, they occupy the same type of habitat. My research was like, surprise, surprise, they're different species, they like different habitat. What I found was that my blackback woodpeckers, they're much more likely to be in those upland pine kind of forests. But three-toed woodpeckers, if you see my map here, on this map of our study area, we only found blackbacks in our study area. We had to expand our research to actually go see where was our three-toeds occupying. And we didn't find them in the upland conifers, no. We had to go down to the lowland black spruce, and that was the habitat that they were occupying, which is very different than this.
Were there blackbacks there too?
Nope, we weren't seeing blackbacks, nope. Which that could just be, we didn't know that they were in there, wasn't time. It was just me out there and one other field tech for a couple months, so it's a lot of ground to cover all by yourself.
That brings up the question I was gonna ask. So how many hours a day were you out there doing this?
A lot. It really depended. You could very easily be gone from sun up till sundown. If there was really, really buggy days that you were, I'm not kidding, there was days when you were covered head to toe, 360 in bugs, and you just lose your mind and you need a day. That's understandable. When I came back and everyone's like, what did you do for the summer? You're like, I was alone in the woods looking for birds. People gave really concerned looks. But it was definitely worth it. And if you've never gone up to Beltrami Island State Forest, I 10 out of 10 recommend it. It's absolutely gorgeous. Great place to pick blueberries. I ate way too many. Yeah.
This particular area, was it prone to wildfires or clear cutting or anything like that? And did you see any correlation between that and like speciation or population density?
Yeah, so the question was kind of asking, did I see any clear cutting or wildfires that occurred? If you actually see on this map here, we have a burn line, which is that red one that occurred. So that was a Paulsburg burn that occurred in 2014. There isn't a lot of burns that occur within that area because most of this land is forestry lands and their main goal is timber production. And all of these orange stands that I had, those were previously selected stands we had prior to going out into the field season. But when we went out there, they got logged at some point and they got completely clear cut. And this doesn't even cover half of the areas that I saw up there. Timber production is going up more and more, especially now that sustainable timber harvest is being in full swing. More and more areas are getting timber harvest, which there was a solid month that we thought was going to be really good woodpecker habitat time. This was during the month of June. We didn't find a single bird that whole month because logging was so intense within that area. But once the logging stopped, they came right back. It's just something that future research I would be really interested in to see and investigate more about.
Was there somebody trying to ask a question on Zoom?
Is there?
I just heard some.
Yes,
Go ahead.
Oh,
Go
I have
ahead.
a question. Can you hear me?
yes.
Okay, Caitlin, this is Carl Sack from Fond du Lac. We met at the GIS conference in the fall. Bemidji. It's neat to see you presenting this here. And I was going to note for everyone in the room there that, GIS people have more fun traipsing around outside in the woods, but then you brought up the mosquitoes. So, but I was wondering, you mentioned, the use of satellite imagery. Were you using, I don't know if
Oh, no.
We lost you.
You cut out. Come back, Carl.
the imagery came project. Oh, can you hear me? Hello?
Lost you for a moment. Start over, please.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Was the remotely sensed data you used for this project, was that mainly in the form of the imagery that was on field maps while you were doing your field work, or were there additional remotely sensed data sets that you added to into the processing? So I saw the forest inventory data in your processing model, but were you using any additional remote sensing in the processing piece?
The big thing that we did focus was using FIM. I do also want to note FIM is now kind of being transported more onto the portal app, so that the FIM data that I have was from it last updated, which was in July of 2022. Now they're switching on to portal, but yeah, we mostly focused, FIM was our main thing. We also use GPS because up in that area, signal sometimes can be a little difficult, especially on a weathery, rainy day. But yeah, FIM was our main one. That's how I selected these stands that I had used prior to our field study, was we went on FIM and we selected those different categories and we saw what stands was FIM being like, yeah, these will work for you. And then we handpicked from there which ones we thought would be the best.
Okay, great. Thanks. Nice, great presentation.
Here, let's thank our speaker again.